Every town has its boogeyman. For Staten Island, New York, it was Cropsey, a child snatcher who supposedly lurked in the woods. He was just a campfire tale, a story to keep kids out of the dark. But sometimes the boogeyman is real. This is the story of how an urban legend became a community's waking nightmare. For generations, the legend of Cropsey terrified Staten Island. He was an escaped patient from a local mental asylum who haunted the abandoned ruins of the Willowbrook State School, a real institution with its own horrific history. This connection to a real place of suffering made the myth feel all the more possible, grounding the story in a terrifying reality. Then, fiction became fact. Throughout the 1970s and 80s, children on Staten Island started to disappear. The campfire tale was no longer a story. A real predator was walking among them, and his name was Andre Rand. Rand was a former custodian at the Willowbrook State School who lived in makeshift campsites in the surrounding woods, the very same place Cropsey was said to dwell. The community's fear grew with each disappearance. In 1981, 7-year-old Holly Ann Hughes vanished. The terror peaked in 1987 with the abduction of 12-year-old Jennifer Schweiger, who had Down syndrome. She was last seen walking with Rand. A month later, her body was found in a shallow grave on the Willowbrook grounds, near one of his campsites. The boogeyman legend was now a homicide investigation. With the discovery of Jennifer's body, Andre Rand was arrested. In 1988, he was convicted of her kidnapping and sentenced to 25 years to life. Years later, in 2004, prosecutors revisited the cold case of Holly Ann Hughes. Rand was found guilty of her kidnapping as well and sentenced to another 25 years to life, ensuring he would likely never be free again. Despite 2 convictions, many believe Rand was responsible for other disappearances that remain unsolved. The line between the Cropsey folklore and Andre Rand's crimes is now forever blurred. The legend lives on, not just as a ghost story, but as a chilling reminder that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are real people. Andre Rand remains in prison and will be eligible for parole in 2037 at the age of 93. For years, the small community of North Pond, Maine, was haunted by strange thefts and rumors of a phantom burglar living in the woods. Most people wrote these off as local legends or campfire tales. But this story was real. This is the story of the man who became their real-life boogeyman. In 1986, a quiet 20-year-old named Christopher Thomas Knight drove his car into the Maine wilderness until it ran out of gas. He left the keys in the ignition, grabbed a tent and a few supplies, and simply walked into the forest. He told no one, and his family never even filed a missing persons report. He had vanished. For the next 27 years, Knight lived in a hidden camp less than a mile from nearby summer cabins. He survived by moving only at night, never lighting a fire, and leaving no tracks. To survive the brutal Maine winters, he'd wake on the coldest nights and pace just to generate body heat. Everything he had was stolen: food, propane, clothes, batteries, and hundreds of books. His isolation was so complete that in nearly 3 decades, he spoke only a single word, "Hi," to a hiker he stumbled upon in the 90s. Meanwhile, the North Pond community lived in fear. They were plagued by more than 1,000 bizarre break-ins over the years. The thief was meticulous, only stealing essentials and never causing major damage. Some residents became so unnerved they started leaving food out on their counters as an offering. The North Pond Hermit was no longer a myth. He was a real boogeyman who could enter their homes at will. It all ended on April 4th, 2013. Game Warden Terry Hughes, determined to solve the case, set up surveillance at a frequently targeted camp. When the alarm tripped one night, Hughes raced to the scene and caught the hermit red-handed with a backpack full of stolen food. The boogeyman was finally revealed, not a monster, but a pale man named Christopher Knight, still wearing glasses from his teenage years. After 27 years, his silent vigil was over. When asked why, Knight explained that in total solitude, he lost his identity. With no audience, no one to perform for, I was just there. There was no need to define myself. I became irrelevant. He claimed he was never lonely, only free. After a 7-month jail sentence, Christopher Knight re-entered society. He now lives a quiet life in rural Maine, forever known as the Phantom of North Pond. In a quiet Swiss forest, a terrifying figure appeared for nearly a decade, starting in the early 2000s. They called him Loyon. Dressed in a military cloak and a gas mask, he walked the same path every day in total silence. His presence turned a peaceful place into one of fear. Then, in 2013, he vanished, leaving behind his costume and a cryptic note that only deepened the mystery of the ghost of malls. It all ended with a pile of clothes on the forest floor, a military cloak, and an old gas mask. Beside them was a letter titled Death Certificate and Testament of the Ghost of Malls. You'd think this would solve the mystery, but instead, it created a brand new puzzle. For about 10 years, people in the Fribourg forest described the same silent, intimidating figure. He was tall, wore a dark boiler suit, a cloak, and a vintage gas mask that completely hid his face. He never hurt anyone, and was even reportedly seen picking wildflowers, but his presence was enough to terrify the community. Families stopped going into the woods, and a place of peace became a source of genuine anxiety. For a decade, Loyon was just a ghost story. That changed in September 2013, when an amateur photographer snapped the first and only known photograph of him. The picture was published by the newspaper Le Matin. The story went international, and his cover was blown. The media frenzy destroyed his anonymity and his isolated existence. The note he left behind is where this story gets even stranger. If you find these mysteries as fascinating as I do, take a second to subscribe for more deep dives into the unknown. The note, titled Death Certificate, was an accusation. Loyon wrote that the media frenzy had murdered a harmless being and that his walks were a kind of happiness therapy. This led most to believe he had taken his own life. The problem? No body was ever found. Did the media push a recluse to suicide? Or was the note just a symbolic death to get his anonymity back? To this day, nobody knows who Loyon was. After that note was discovered, the sightings just stopped. The ghost of malls was gone. It leaves you with a haunting question. Was Loyon a monster to be feared, or was he a victim, haunted not by ghosts, but by the rest of us? Let me know your theories in the comments. In Fairfax County, Virginia, there's a place locals call Bunnyman Bridge. Legend says on Halloween night, the ghost of an escaped asylum patient appears, a man in a bunny suit, armed with a bloody hatchet. It's a terrifying urban legend, but here's the twist. In 1970, the Bunny Man was very real, and the true story is almost as strange as the myth it created. The true story begins with official police reports from October 1970. First, a man in a white bunny suit screamed at a parked couple about trespassing, then threw a hatchet that smashed their car window. 10 days later, a security guard found a man in a similar costume chopping at a porch post with an axe, warning him, "If you don't get out of here, I'm going to bust you on the head." An extensive police investigation followed, but the axe-wielding bunny was never caught or identified. The real attack stopped, but the legend was just getting started. As the story of the 1970 attack spread, the facts morphed into a much darker legend. This new version claimed that in 1904, an asylum transport bus crashed and an inmate named Douglas Griffin escaped. Soon after, skinned rabbits were found hanging from trees, followed by a man's body at the Colchester overpass. But this origin story is pure folklore. Historians confirmed there was no local asylum, the nearby prison didn't exist in 1904, and there are no records of a Douglas Griffin. The tale had blended the real attacker from 1970 with a fictional ghost. Every legend needs a location, and this one found its home at the Colchester Overpass. Though none of the 1970 incidents happened there, its isolated, eerie atmosphere made it the perfect backdrop for the growing myth. The single-lane tunnel, surrounded by dense woods, became the Bunnyman's supposed haunting ground. Today, the bridge is a destination for ghost hunters and thrill-seekers, all hoping to catch a glimpse of the infamous phantom. The Bunnyman legend is a chilling example of how folklore is born. It began with two bizarre but non-lethal crimes committed by an unidentified man in a bunny suit. Over time, fear and rumor twisted these real events into a terrifying ghost story. A real man with a hatchet became a supernatural killer, and an ordinary railroad bridge became a haunted landmark. The real Bunnyman was only around for a few weeks in 1970, but the legend he inspired has proven to be immortal.